Hi, I was asked about the sacrifice of Jesus and him being the Lamb of God. But in order to do that, I need to start a short series leading up to that point. We first need to start with the idea of God making man in his image. We need to look at what it means to be the image of God. Now, keep in mind, the Bible is ancient literature, and the Old Testament specifically is ancient Hebrew literature. It was written to a specific people at a specific time and in a specific place. And in the culture of the time, the image of God were in relations to kings. See, kings were considered a physical representation of God. Think of the ancient Egypt and the pharaohs. But in Genesis chapter 1, God is portrayed as a king. He speaks and things happen, just as kings would speak and orders were followed. See, creation itself obeys the commands of the kings. It says so in Psalm 33. Throughout ancient Eastern creation accounts, the world was born out of conflict, war, anger. But the biblical account, God is seen as the king who created the world out of peace, speaking it into existence. Peace, not chaos. It was a radically different view than any of the other ancient accounts at the time. Humans were created to rule or have dominion, subdue the world, cultivate it against its wishes, and to sustain life by gardening and agriculture. Humans were given the authority to rule on God's behalf in terms of the title image of God. The word images, number one reference, is in reference to idols, which Israel was forbidden to make. Why? Because God didn't want us to degrade or reduce God to a statue. We are the image of God. We are the representation of God, not a statue or a golden calf. We are the physical representation of God's presence and rule in creation. When people see us, they should see God. God rules the world through people getting married, having families, tending the earth, not through kings, but through people multiplying, tending to, protecting God's creation. We are to live under the reign and the rule of the King. We're to trust him, obey him, worship him, love one another, and the rest of the created world. That's what it means biblically in Genesis chapter 1 and Genesis chapter 2 to be the image of God. Now, Jesus is the supreme image of God, and we're going to get to that. But in order to really get to that, we need to understand what happened to us being image bearers and why we go from being good representations of God to bad representations of God, and how we go from being a statue, if you would look at it from like in Egyptian philosophy, how we're looked at it from being the statue, the representation of God, to a fallen statue, a broken statue, poor representations of God. But we'll cover that next time.